Hello, fantasy enthusiasts, and welcome back to another episode of Discover New Worlds featuring Ryan D. Meier. As most of you know, when you join Worldhoppers Guild's newsletter, you gain instant access to a growing library of free fantasy books and short stories. We launched the program June 1st and started out with 5 authors on board. As of today, we've added a handful more, with more coming over the next coming months. If it's already something you're subscribed to, that's okay. Head over to our Facebook page to check out the new additions. One of the recently added works is a short story called Dirk Goes to Church. It introduces you to author Ron L. Lahr's protagonist for his series, The Cathartic Chronicles. He joins me today for another great conversation. Check it out. All right, welcome back. I'm here with Ron L. Lahr. Am I pronouncing that last name right, Ron? All right,
you are
good. So welcome to the show. Ron is a fantasy author generally, but he also writes some sci-fi, and a lot of his stuff is what you would consider in the humorous category. And I could attest to that after test running one of his stories that I enjoyed very much. So Ron, before we jump into that, I'll pass it to you so you can give yourself a little introduction.
Sure. So far I've only published fantasy, the Cathaldi Chronicles. The first 2 books are out. The first book has an audiobook. And then the third book, so close to finishing the first draft of the third book of the trilogy. And then there's also an anthology that takes place in the world of the Cathaldi Chronicles, but I have 3 stories in it, but then the rest of the stories are by other people.
Very cool.
That is a real trip to have people write your characters, and some of them are just the setting. But it's almost surreal to, see your world. There's one story that all the major gods are the characters, and so I created these gods, and now they're doing stuff. That's really fun. I'm excited for that. That comes out in the fall, the end of September, I think. And then, but now I'm.
Do you
writing,
mind if I? Yeah, let me jump in, if you don't mind, Ron,
okay.
Because I find that fascinating. The anthology. So you wrote some of the short stories, and now I'm assuming, is it somebody? Are these folks that you've collaborated with? Are they people who happen to be fans of the series? Like, how did you start this folder?
Sure. I have a friend who is an unpublished author, and he and his wife are working. The stuff he writes, I think, is amazing. But he's started a lot of things and never finished anything. So finally, he and his wife finished a book, and they're trying to get it published the traditional publishing route. But he read Children of Cathaldi, the first book, and he said, "Man, I really enjoyed it." He didn't say, "I want to write a short story in it," but he said something that made me think I should ask him to write a short story in the world. And then I realized, man, that would be really cool. And I have a lot of friends who write,
sure.
Including, the For Dummies books.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the guy who wrote the first For Dummies book, DOS for Dummies, which is by far the best-selling title in that series. He and I are friends, and so he's writing a story for it, which he's an international best-selling author, but for just those kind of books, instructional books. But anyway,
yes.
And then so I asked a lot of people. Then I just started putting it out on Facebook and stuff, that I was taking submissions. So I met a bunch of people that way. And probably the most interesting one is some teachers from India reached out to me, and they teach multiple subjects, but one was English, English and creative writing. So they wanted these kids, who must be like genius children, to write short stories in another language in grade school and junior high, and maybe high school. Yeah, which I'm like, I can't even imagine. I mean, I thought I was a smart kid. Apparently I was an idiot compared to these kids. So they wrote a ton of short stories, and I kind of gave them some idea generators. And they all came in. The little kid ones are adorable. They're all really fun, and I decided to make a part at the end of the anthology because I didn't want to not do any of them. They were just too cool. So I decided that one of the characters in the books and also in the short story that you listen to, Vone, he's kind of an amateur historian, so he's going to have a section at the end of the anthology where what the children wrote are fairy tales, and they're the fairy tales of this world because that explains kind of the simplistic nature of some of them and some similar themes, and then he will kind of talk about each one at the end, and the moral or where it comes from or whatever. And that because they were kind of seeing it as a competition, but I couldn't say no to anybody. So yeah, that anthology turned out to be pretty fun.
Oh, that's wild. That must have been, because I would imagine, I mean, in a way, right? You're reading sort of, I mean, kind of your own fan fiction. I mean, it's not exactly like that, but that's essentially what you're reading, right?
Yeah, a little bit. And what is interesting and humbling is when they come up with some ideas that I think are brilliant and that I would have never thought of. I'm like, oh man, my mind doesn't work that way, but that's genius. That's really cool. And I'm hoping that some of the short stories will lead into something more with some of those authors. Like we'll write something together. I love collaborating. So I think that would be fun, but we'll see.
Yeah, so I'll let you go back to anything else you'd like to say to introduce. Sorry to jump in, but I thought that was
no.
Yeah, that's wicked cool. But I am gonna listen, I'm gonna watch you though, because if you start publishing, ripping out like 10, 12, 15 books a year, I'm gonna know that maybe that school in India, we're working them a little too hard. I think
outsourcing
so.
My writing.
You can't keep calling it a contest, right, Ron?
Yeah. No, that would be, well, what a dream it would be to put out that many books a year.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
This year I have 4 coming out, but mostly because the anthology, I only wrote a little bit of it. And then
sure.
the other 2 books, the humorous advice parody kind of, and which is called You're as Stupid as You Are Fat, How to Talk to Women. And I'll tell you a little story about that in a bit, but I wrote that years ago. And then I also, as a very young man, wrote a humorous science fiction novel with a friend of mine from high school. I mean, it was after high school, but we had met in high school, and it's called You Get What You Steal. And so we never put it out, but now we're rewriting it and releasing it. And he has written some stuff on his own in the intervening years. We kind of just touched base again. Well, so because 2 books have already been written and then one was mostly written by other, it looks like I'm having a very productive year, but really I haven't done crap, because of family issues and stuff. But You're as Stupid as You Are Fat, How to Talk to Women. I was married, and my first wife and I, who I call my practice wife, she left after 15 years. And so I started dating. And this one woman I was dating said, "You don't know anything about women." And I said, "What a bunch of crap. I have a great relationship with my ex. I have a great relationship with my mom. I have 2 daughters. I have a great relationship with them. I'm like a genius at talking to women." So to make sure I won that argument, I thought I would write a book, because if you have a published book about how to talk to women, how can you possibly lose an argument?
You can't.
But then I started writing the book, and the person giving the advice turned out to be this just awful guy, sexist and stupid and mean. And I'm writing and I'm laughing like crazy. And I was traveling a lot for work, so I'd be writing on a plane or in an airport, and I'm laughing at my own jokes, looking like a crazy person. And I wouldn't publish it with my own name because I used to care about my reputation. But now I don't. So I'm going to republish it with my name and the pen name, and then explain what on. But yeah, it turned out though, after having written that book, it saved Children of Cthulhu for me, because I had written Children of Cthulhu a long time ago, 25 years ago. Third person, different character was the main character, and I loved the story, but I finished the book and I'm reading it and I'm like, it's fine. I don't love it. And it was very disappointing because, you want to love your stuff. Well, I kept rewriting it over the years, and then I finally decided, I mean, the character of Dirk is kind of ripping off the character or the person who I use as a pen name for How to Talk to Women.
Mm-hmm.
He's just not as bad. I mean, I think there is at least something likable about Dirk.
This guy is worse.
Oh yeah, the Zach Bear is the pen name I used, and he's worse. I mean, yeah, he's awful. But writing it in first person and using Dirk made me love the book, and it changed everything. I mean, it got me really back into committing time. Part of it was my kids moved out, grew up and moved away. But the other part of it was I loved what I was producing, and that's a big motivator.
Writing is a grind. So
Yeah.
I have tried to write things that my heart's not in, and I don't blame you. How can you? It's very difficult to have that self-control. I know some people do, but not me.
I keep multiple projects going so I can, if I get into something and it's not working for me on my main project, like right now the third book of the trilogy of the Cthulhu Chronicles, that's the main project. But
yeah,
if it isn't going, then I go work on one of the other books or the short stories, and that I'll eventually land on something that'll get me going, or I take the day off and don't work on it that day. I mean, that happens sometimes, not very often.
It does.
Usually something will jump out and grab me.
Well, that's good. And that's, that's a testament for the writers out there who have a project that, they struggled with. You can always revive it, right? Like you said, it's different now, but you have that feeling. So why don't we talk about the book series? So before we jump into the Children of Cthulhu, I had the pleasure of listening to, through Worldhoppers, we're going to make sure that the story and text is available, but we'll also make sure to leave the link, because who did the recording for that? It was the gentleman whose YouTube channel it was, right?
Yes. Yeah. Chris.
Yes.
I'm so bad with names.
He did. I know. And I saw it too. I should have jotted a note down. But he did a wonderful job. I thought he really brought Dirk to life. But so let's talk about Dirk a little bit. So
sure.
Guys, the story is Dirk Goes to Church. Big disclaimer. This is not your average Sunday morning service that he goes to. His friend is a priest, or is there a better term for that I should be using? But basically he
no, he's a priest. Yeah.
Yep. Priest of a god of war. Right. So this church itself is much more like a battle grounds than anything. So I thought that was great. And I have to read the first line of the story because I think it really sets the tone. So first line goes, "Look, I think we can all agree that sometimes having friends is a real pain in the ass. They want to do all the sorts of things for them, help them move, kill a guy, or hide a body." And I thought for the opening line, I listened to it, I kept going, and then I went back and I said, I want to note that, because I thought that as I got to know Dirk in this little short period of time, that seems to be exactly the first thought that would be on his mind.
Thank you.
Yeah. So why don't I hand it to you? Why don't you talk about Dirk Goes to Church, and then you're welcome. You could transfer right over to the book one.
Sure. I wrote, after I completed Children of Cthulhu, I wanted to, start building a newsletter list, and I needed a reader magnet. And because I had already decided that the fourth book was going to be an anthology, due to that friend of mine, I had been thinking about short stories I wanted to write. So I had a list of, I don't know, maybe 24 stories I wanted to write about the characters from the first 3 books. And of course, Dirk is my favorite. So I thought, if I'm going to do a reader magnet and people are going to know, I want them to know what they're going to get if they pursue reading my stuff. It should be about Dirk. And this was my favorite idea that I had at the time for a short story about Dirk, because I also love the character of Vone, the priest of the god of war. And I had this idea about how they selected their high priest for a long time. And it was just background I have a big old binder of just facts about my world, the world building, and I don't go out of my way to shove them into the story. I just know them. I mean, because what I'm talking about. Sometimes there's just too much extraneous stuff about the world. It's not relevant to the story. So, but it was there, and I liked it, and I wanted to use it. So I started 3 short stories, and then I had a few of my friends that are writers read them and say, "What do you think?" And the funny part was, at the same time, 20 books, 50K, the Facebook group, which I love, and they're amazing. They do these anthologies to help new writers, and they were doing one for fantasy, and I thought, I'm in. I mean, my stuff is so different. Everything else they're going to get is going to be the same. My stuff will stand out. They're going to love me. Their reaction was the exact opposite. This is too different. They read this story of Dirk Goes to Church, and they were like, it's great, but it doesn't fit with the rest of the stuff. And I wrote back to them and said, that's so funny, because I thought that would be a big benefit, and it turned out to be the opposite. But anyway, that's how this story came to be. And then luckily enough, I stumbled across Chris's website, talltaletv.com, and that guy is a hero. I mean, he lost his sight for a while and discovered audiobooks, and then when he regained it, he said, I want to help new indie, primarily fantasy and science fiction authors, by recording their stories and putting them out there. So he doesn't charge you anything. I mean, it's all just really awesome. And
that's amazing.
And it was also interesting because, having had Children of Cathaldi turned into an audiobook by somebody who did a great job with Dirk, it was really interesting to hear somebody else's take on it. I mean, I have to say, the whole writing experience, as you meet people and interact and do these things, is surreal. I mean, it's crazy to hear your stuff performed, because I mean, he's not reading it, really, they're performing it, and that is awesome.
Yeah, and we'll give him one more shout out, and I'll leave the link obviously below, because he does a really phenomenal job. The last 2 words I had for Dirk, these I want to really drive home, because he's a character that I think, and like you said, it is so different. He's the opposite of what most characters you're going to find in fantasy, or at least the guys that you're going to mainly follow as what you would consider protagonists, right? So he reminds me, I was laughing to myself. He reminds me of like Dennis Leary, and that song. Are you familiar with the "I'm an Asshole" song?
Yes.
I can see Dirk singing it now in the voice of the video. So I think that's a good introduction for him. So definitely check that out. And then it sounds like that's a really good warm up for book 1.
Okay, great. Thanks. So it is a 3-book trilogy about this. I mean, Dirk is kind of going about his life. He's a thief. He's doing well for himself. And his friend, who was the main character in the original drafts of the book, his name's Thylos. He's a warder. His job is kind of border protection. And he stumbles across these ancient enemies that everybody thought was dead. They oppose the gods. It kind of, I'll get back to that, I guess. But so they oppose the gods, and if they don't stop them, and the gods step in, there'll be a lot of destruction. So they are very motivated to protect themselves and their families, save the world, to do this. And the first book is them. They're just trying to get to people in a position of authority and power to let them know that this threat exists, and the Cathaldi, the bad guys, are trying to kill him. And the whole reason it started is I thought, I mean, in fantasy, I love fantasy. Obviously, I read a ton of it, have since I was a kid. But I thought, the gods are real in a lot of fantasy. There's no arguing about it. There aren't any atheists saying, I deny the existence of a god. I mean, they can manifest. So in my world, the gods manifest sometimes physically. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to deny their existence. And I thought, but could there still be people who don't want to worship them? And just noodling about that decades ago, led me to the Cathaldi, who are, their attitude can best be summed up like, the gods are like our parents, move out of your parents' basement, kiss a girl, get out of there, grow up.
Yep.
If we want to realize the full potential of humanity, we need to move beyond the gods taking care of us. The unfortunate thing is that if you don't agree with them, then they tend to kill you. So, which, in some way weakens the gods because there's fewer followers. And there's a lot of history there I don't want to get into, but that's the first book. The second book is called Assassins of Cathaldi because, they kill some people. The third one that's almost done is Destroyers of Cathaldi. And then the fourth one, the anthology, is Tales of Cathaldi. And then I hope to do, one of the short stories I'm doing for the anthology is Dirk as a detective. He is solving a murder.
Okay.
And I so want to write novels like that. A cross genre thing, they're murder mysteries, but it's Dirk the jerk, and I'm like, he'll get to go see characters from the other books, and the short stories in the anthology. And I just think it would be so fun. So that's my next stuff for Cathaldi. They won't be related to the main story, but it'll take place later. But yeah, knock on wood, that will take off.
Well, that's great. Now you said you're nearing the end of book 3. Are we looking? What kind of release time period do you have in your mind for that?
I'm hoping July 19th.
Oh, great! Wonderful.
So yeah, not long at all. I mean, I have maybe a week's worth of writing to do, and then just editing and rewriting. But the goal is still July 19th. I mean, if I want to get everything out, I have a lot to do for the rest of the year.
I hear you. No, it's a job that never ends, because by the time you release a book, I'm sure you're already on to writing the next one, right?
Oh yeah.
Or you have, like you said, the alternate project that you've been working on. So there's always something in the fire, I'm sure, for you.
Yes. I mean, my ultimate goal would be to have multiple series going on, that I'm writing, whether alone or with people collaborating, and always have so much to do. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, writing is a grind, but it's also the most fulfilling thing. And
well said.
So yeah, I would like to be very busy working on many things. We'll see. I mean, this year is definitely busy, but somehow I don't expect that next year I'll just be laying on the pile of cash that comes in from these 4 books. I expect I'll still be working, trying to get people to notice my work. It's hard.
Yes. That's another part of the business that can feel like a grind at times, for sure. But hey, you gotta keep thinking about that, laying on that pile of money,
Yeah, it sounds uncomfortable and yet delightful.
Exactly. Well, Ron, it was a blast. Why don't you give us just a moment? Tell us where we can find you.
The best place to go is Cathaldi.com, Kathaldi.com. And there I have, the links to my newsletter, my Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. And I recommend my newsletter. It comes out the first and third Mondays. Normally there's another Dirk short story that I'm serializing in the newsletter.
Very nice.
There's the characters like Vone will write up a little article about the world. And I do interviews. Like I've interviewed the guys that did the 2 audiobooks,
Sure.
both Chris from Tall Tale and the guy who did Alan Adelberg, who did the Children of Cthulhu one. So I mean, I put a lot of content in. They're not like some newsletters where people are just buy my stuff. There's a lot of cool content.
Hey, you bring something to the table. It's not just an email sacrifice.
Right. I'm not just begging in it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. You got to do the show with the bag, right? I'm just kidding.
I want people to know about the world. I think it's fun stuff, and I certainly eat it up about the worlds I enjoy reading about. So we'll see.
Absolutely, yeah, no, and I agree with you. The Children of Catharty sounds great. Well done with the character Dirk. He grabbed me instantly. So
great.
I hope the audience will give him a try, and they'll be able to get a taste of your humorous fantasy, which I enjoyed very much.
Well, thank you very much.
No problem. Well, thank you very much. And everybody, I'll make sure I leave all of his links up on the page afterwards, and keep out there discovering new worlds. Take care. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. A big thank you to Ron for joining the show today. And I can't tell you enough that you need to get out there and check out his short story, Dirk Goes to Church. It's a lot of fun and a great introduction to his Cathartic Chronicles. Next week, we'll be back with another episode. I'll be joined by sci-fi author Jason DeGray. Thank you, and until then, get out there and discover new worlds.